2350 Ocoee Street. Call 624-0021 for an appointment now. Certified by the American Board of Surgery and the American Board of Plastic Surgery. Offering facial procedures, body contouring, skin resurfacing, and specializing in breast augmentation, including the newest transumbilical or belly button augmentation for less scarring, ladies. Call Dr. Christopher Chase for an appointment now, 624-0021.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Woof FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, welcome back into Backfire. We were talking about some of the gun regulations, the executive actions. But let me say something real quick before I forget my thought. You know, one of the ways that we could promote gun safety, Franklin, I thought of one while we were on break. I was listening to you guys argue back and forth. But I think that we could just charge an extra 50 cents for every bag of popcorn in the theater. And then go ahead and put the gun safety, ownership, and responsibility in the theater. And let's start training our children at a young age before they watch those violent movies on safe gun ownership. What do you think?
Well, I can tell you, I grew up with guns all over the house, and they were loaded, and I was shooting guns when I was 5 or 6 years old. And I can tell you, we got spanked if we pointed a toy gun at someone. The real problem here, and we ought to be able to have some agreement, even Franklin and I could have some agreement, there is a real serious lack of personal responsibility in our society across all kinds of issues. People, drunks. Apparently, just this past week in Chattanooga, there was a guy drunk, killed someone, got 6 months in jail. That's not personal responsibility. You killed another human being. And, well, my bad, I was drunk. The gun issue, nobody wants to take serious responsibility. I got spanked for pointing a toy gun. If you tried to press an idea like that today, people would go, oh, well, that's silly, that's ridiculous. No, it's not. A gun's not a toy, and that's how I was brought up. Not a toy, don't play with it.
It's a weapon. I was taught in the military that it was a weapon. Anyway, what do you think about my idea of 50 cents more on a bag of popcorn, Chancey, and promote this safety in the theaters?
I do think that your original point about needing a dialogue about the effect of how violence is portrayed in the entertainment industry is a reasonable one for us to have.
It's out of control.
Now, it's a hard question to answer because, as we've talked about before, there are constitutional rights involved there too.
Well,
and it's not easily clear how you do that. I mean, the way we used to do it was to have this rating system so that people could make judgments. But I think what we have done gradually over time is relax those so that younger people get more access to what previously was harder for them to get access to.
Well, Franklin, since we've talked about banning types of guns, why don't we ban types of movies?
Yeah.
Well, as I've said repeatedly, John, the Second Amendment is like the First Amendment.
But wait a minute.
I don't take an absolutist view on anything. I understand there's a constitutional right there. I understand that.
Would you support banning violent movies? You've said you support banning assault rifles.
But I might support them not being available to minors unless their parents are with them.
Well, assault rifles.
Be okay with me.
Wait a minute. Assault rifles are not actually legally allowed to be owned by minors already, so we already have that on guns. They're talking about an outright ban on assault rifles. Would you support an outright ban on violent movies?
No, I wouldn't.
So you can see the constitutional problem with censorship on the movie, but you don't have a problem with censorship of guns.
You're not listening to what I've said. What I've said is that I don't think any of our constitutional rights are absolute, that there's no restrictions we can have.
Well, then we're back to my original argument several weeks ago. If you don't own a gun, you don't use a gun, it's not a part of your life, you don't have a problem taking that right away from someone else.
I do own a gun, John.
I didn't say you didn't, but I'm saying you keep quoting the public would support. The public doesn't always support the right thing.
Would you support getting rid of violent video games?
I actually think that's a bigger problem than the movies.
I don't know how you do that.
Get rid of it.
Would I support it? I can't imagine how you could possibly do it, number one. Okay, so whether I supported it or not.
Let's take a call. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I personally believe if you guys would just stick to a little bit of local politics and stuff, and get off the national, there would be a lot less hollering and bickering, and you're only on there about 45 minutes anyway.
Yeah.
I would think one day a week, 45 minutes of local politics would be a whole lot better than national politics.
All right, Bird Dog, your advice has been held.
Why don't you just talk about the airport?
Well, there's the airport's about to open. There's nothing really to talk about, but we're going to have a wonderful new airport.
I think it's a wonderful development.
They're fixing to open it Friday, have a big, I think, a blast off or whatever they called it.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how come it went from 10 million to 42 million.
Because it's government, and that's
It's
the way
government.
government works.
Welcome to the world of government.
Well, did the government build that airport?
I think that
Pretty much.
the people that paid the fuel tax on airplanes did. But
Well,
yes,
No.
yes. Of course, the government is the banker on it.
Of course, frankly, if you
no,
want,
I mean, this is a perfect opportunity for us to have a serious conversation about what government does and doesn't do.
well, if
okay?
you're going to have that, let's talk about the fire halls,
Yeah, let's talk
the
about
fire
firearms.
department.
Okay. I'd just like to point
Hey,
out.
Bird Dog, I was getting to these points, but we just weren't quite
I'd just
there
like
yet.
to point out that 90% of the cost of the airport.
Let's stick to some local stuff
Well-
and stay off the national politics.
We can, but the local stuff doesn't. Politics don't change that much. They linger for about a year at a time on one subject.
But the thing is, you might have some influence on local politics on the radio.
Oh, I think that's unlikely.
All right, Bird Dog. Hey, is your cows doing all right out there? Hello.
I think he's off.
Okay. Anyway, I know Bird Dog was upset about the airport originally. He thought it was going to upset the milk in the cows or something out there at his place. But anyway, where were we? We were talking about something there.
We're
Local.
talking about government and increased
Firehouse.
costs.
Yeah.
Well, the airport too. That's a huge increase in the cost on that. But that's it's the way government works. They don't have an incentive to try and keep the cost down.
Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Hey guys, I'd like to thank the county commission for passing their resolution yesterday, 2013-01 that kind of basically what it said was that it reasserted their belief in the right in the Second Amendment in Article 1, Section 26 of the Tennessee Constitution, and passed pretty much overwhelmingly. We had there was one vote to not vote, and then the rest, I think it was 13, was for it. So I think that's a reassertion of at least from a local standpoint, and that resolution will be passed on to our state and national representatives to show them that the county supports it. I was a little taken aback that
What does 2013-01 represent? I don't know.
It's a county commission resolution supporting the Second Amendment in the Tennessee Constitution and the right to protect us and our rights to firearms.
It basically, it's a resolution. As far as on a local level, does it have any practical effect? No, but the county commission periodically on major issues that it sees a moral or constitutional situation arising, they will pass a resolution to basically let the Nashville legislature know, here's how we feel locally, here's how our constituents feel.
All right, well, good. That was a good thing done.
We're also sending that resolution to I've sent it to Polk County, to Sequatchie County, to Marion County, some people in Hamilton County to try to push this forward so that we get these resolutions passed in all the county commissions to show that the state of Tennessee supports and will defend the right to our Second Amendment rights.
All right, Dan. Thanks a lot for the information.
Yeah.
All right, now then, I've been reading a lot about fire stations being built around town. I think we've got, about 3 under construction right now or so, and we're hiring a lot of new employees right now. And
all the costs are coming in significantly over budget.
Yeah, and now they're saying that the volunteers are still needed for the county fire department.
Right.
Let's take a call. Go ahead, caller.
Hey, Dope.
Hello.
Hey, Doe, I need to speak to you off the air this second, please.
Off the air? That'd be hard for me to do right now. How about after the show?
Okay. I'll give you a call.
Okay, that'll be fine.
Thank you.
All right.
Here's my problem. We never go back and we never revisit original arguments. The original argument was the contract with the city was too expensive and the merger was too expensive. And I asked at the time, I said, based on what? Because they didn't have any estimates on how much it was going to cost in total to go on their own.
Right.
But they still used that argument. It was too expensive. Well, now all of the costs that they've originally put forward on going it alone are coming in, and I mean they're coming in hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars over. And nobody's going back and revisiting saying, hey, we sold this whole thing on the idea it was going to be cheaper, and now it's coming in more expensive. You would just think on a logical level someone would want to revisit the decision.
Yeah. I think it wasn't it based all on saving $1.5 million a year the city was charging the county for fire protection?
Well, the city came down, there were negotiations back and forth on how much it was. It was 1.8 or 9, and then I think at the end we're going to accept 1.5. But my point is, if you say that 1.5, and I'm not advocating any of that, but if you say that was too expensive, one, you ought to know how much your alternative costs, which they didn't know at the time they voted.
Right.
And two, once you start down that alternative road, when you start to see that the costs are coming in significantly higher, wouldn't you think a prudent thing to do would be to revisit your original thoughts?
One of the things I thought would have happened is the county would have hired some of the city firefighters that have already been previously trained. Because would you not think the city would need to lay some off?
Well, that's a de facto merger argument.
I mean, really. I mean, now then the county's hiring people and they're having to go through a complete training process. Anyway, go ahead, caller. You're live.
Yeah. Going back to this games of violence and all that stuff.
Sure.
I support taking them off the market.
Taking the games off the market?
Games, yeah.
What about the violence in movies?
I think they need to put a hold on some of that stuff, too.
Mm-hmm.
Because on these games, I've seen them where the more people you kill, the more points you got.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this kid that went into the high school and shot up everything over there, if I'm not mistaken, he was a habitual gamer. I mean, he played these things.
Well, the only bad thing about that, Steve, though, is the fact that he was a habitual gamer doesn't really cut him out of the pack for the vast majority of teenage boys. My son plays these games, and I can tell you, I know a lot about guns. My son knows tons more about odd European. These games are so accurate. He can sit down and tell you which ones are select fire, which ones have grenade launchers, which ones have this, have that. They're very explicit games, and the movies. As a young child, my dad took me to the Dirty Harry movies, and I know there was debate there. Well, should you see a movie like that? But the violence in that movie was all cast in the light of good versus evil. And at the end of that movie, the good guy was going to win, the bad guy was going to lose. Right. The problem with so many of these games is there's no context of good and bad. Matter of fact, you can be the bad guy if you want to play as the Al-Qaeda guy or the Nazi. There's one of them where they fight Nazi zombies. Now, how is that good for anybody to spend 4 hours a day fighting? And maybe you want to be a Nazi zombie. That's, to me, more dangerous than the movies, because the context of a movie can actually affirm law and order. It can affirm society.
I think that's where the problem lies, though, is determining, what's good and what's not. I mean, I went last night.
Thanks, caller. I saw last night
the Zero Dark 30 movie, the Bin Laden movie.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of violence in it.
There's violence in all the movies now. I'm telling you, they're everywhere.
We're talking about a historic account of what transpired. I'd be hard pressed to say that movie shouldn't reflect what the reality was at that point. I thought it was a well done movie, but I'd have to take a step back and say, But it's violent.
But now there's also the question, Franklin. Like I said, that movie in context, you come away with good guy wins, bad guy loses. But even in that context, is it appropriate for a 7-year-old, a 6-year? We were at the movies last weekend,
No,
and I
it's
saw
not appropriate for a 6 or 7.
I saw a whole collection of young children. I mean, there was a couple there that was 5, and a sister that was 7, and another one that's 9, and the mom was with them. They had been to see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, you tell me what 5-year-old needs to see a human body butchered with a chainsaw?
It's amazing.
And then you wonder why that 5-year-old 10 years later gets a hold of a gun and shoots people?
Yeah. You know, when I grew up, the violence that we had growing up was we were always looking forward to getting our cowboy boots and getting our toy guns on our hips there. You know, we'd play, I used to do the Matt Dillon deal when the TV came on with the draw, you know, where you draw. I always could outdraw him. I was always faster than he was.
Matt never shot you once, did he?
Matt never shot me once. Let's go ahead and take a call. Go ahead, caller.
Good morning. I think John just briefly touched on the whole problem here, and I think y'all kind of looking at it. The whole problem is not the guns or the violence. The whole problem starts with the morals in the family. And if you have a mom who is taking a child to see those movies at that age, she is telling the children that's fine to do those things. Unlike John and I, who were raised in homes that the gun was standing loaded in the corner, and you were told from the time you couldn't even understand language that the gun is dangerous, do not touch it. And the whole problem with all these shootings, it's not the movies, it's not the TV, it's not the video games.
Well, it goes back to the parent, but the problem is a lot of these kids don't even have parents anymore.
Well, that's true.
I mean, there is so many of these kids that just don't even have parents. You've got kids having kids now, and that's a problem also. Let me ask you something. What would you suggest we do to protect the kids in our schools?
Well, I like the SRO program. I am for armed people in the schools. My dad, if he has on his pants, he has his gun. So I've always grown up in an environment where...
Now, wait a minute. George Bang Bang Poe?
Yes.
Okay.
So, their philosophy has always been the best protection is to be armed yourself. I am not armed. My husband carries a gun. I do not. I have lost my purse about 72 different times, so I'm not going to carry a gun because there's no telling where I might lay it down.
I appreciate your sense of responsibility.
Well, actually, Lisa, let me read something. That actually brought something up.
You should have told everybody you don't carry a gun, though.
There's a Virginia lawmaker who last week upset the chamber because he walks in carrying an AK-47 into the chamber and didn't tell anybody. They all got upset. At one point, this is a Democrat, big backer of gun control. At one point, a Republican legislator had to ask him to please remove his finger from the trigger well, because he had his finger in the trigger on this gun. Well, now it turns out this guy actually had possession of 3 or 4 assault weapons in the early 90s that he lost. He was a prosecutor, and he borrowed them to demonstrate how bad guns were in the schools, and he lost them. The only reason they found out that they were gone was one of them turned up in a drug dealer's hands. 2 others have never been found. This guy, now he's one of the big supporters of gun control, but he would take these assault rifles and an assault shotgun and leave them laying in the back seat of his car with the door unlocked. The police said they regularly would open his door, take the guns out, lock them in the trunk of the car. So this is the guy pushing for more gun control. As a matter of fact, he says we shouldn't even be allowed to own an assault rifle, but he's actually lost 2 assault rifles on top of his indictments for assault, for bribery, for conspiracy, and losing his law license. That's one of the problems. There's such a hypocrisy here on the left side about this gun control argument.
Hey, Lisa,
Yes.
You still there?
Yes.
You said you were for the SROs in the school system, adding additional SRO officers.
Yes.
And I know that there would be a tremendous cost to local government for that, not federal government. I'm sure the federal government could come down with some grant funds or something,
But
or
that's
matching
our money
funds.
too.
That I know, it's all our money. And is that where we need to be? I mean, wouldn't it be easier just to put a fence up around a school and just treat it like a prison and have police out there? Maybe have police stations, sub-police stations scattered around town where...
that's been one of the issues
I know
in our local schools that a lot of parents have objected to. A lot of the schools adopted a policy where they keep the doors locked.
Yeah.
And you have to go in through a designated door, and you have to check in when you get there. But a lot of parents raised heck about that.
Yeah. Well,
and I will have to say too, the Sandy Hook shooter wasn't able to get in through the door.
He shot his way
and he
in.
shot the window out.
Yeah.
So now you're down to, okay, we're going to have the doors and we're going to have bulletproof glass.
Yeah. I know at the Boys and Girls Club, for instance, right now, I'm very familiar with that. But we've just recently put in camera systems in all the units that they can sit there and watch every area all over the deal, and they have to come in, sign in, and get buzzed in. And then once they come in the door, there's an iPad there for them to log in that they're there. And that's a pretty good system. I see that's where schools are going to have to go. They're going to have to do more stuff electronically and protect themselves. But
a lot of the schools already are. North Lee has a camera system.
Yeah.
But the Sandy Hook shooter, that also goes back to the home and the family. The mother admitted the boy had problems, that she needed to get him treatment, and she had not done it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm personally on the side of we need better mental health treatment. We need better access to mental health, and we also need, I had a customer years ago who was obviously mentally ill. The man was rubbing Raid on his head in his car, and I called some people, and they said unless he wants to do something about his problems, nobody can do anything. So our laws have been that we can't force you into treatment until you harm someone. And I think that is the major law that needs to be reevaluated.
Well, that's along those lines. We were talking about these executive orders earlier. There were two of them that dealt with those issues. One of them was clarifying what degree to which Medicaid and insurance plans under Obamacare will have to provide mental health services.
you think every firearm in Cleveland, Tennessee should be registered at the courthouse?
No.
Okay.
So like I said, every time there has ever been a disaster like this, it wasn't necessarily the guns. The guns were not the problem. The access to the guns were not the problem. The problem was with the individuals who took these actions and the fact that they had problems, and there were people that were aware that they had problems, and everybody said, we'll be fine, just leave them alone, and everything will turn out fine.
Well, actually, one of the ways this is being pushed is the mass shootings. And we had this last week. Everybody said, these mass shootings are so bad. The more than 50% of all the mass murders in America have not used a gun. The majority of mass murders in America have chosen arson. Burning people to death, burning buildings down has actually been the number one choice of most mass murders, not guns. The number one mass murder in America was the 9/11, which was a box cutter. They used basically a box cutter, allowed them to crash those planes and kill over 3,000 people. Then you've had the Oklahoma City bombing, which was fertilizer. Hundreds of people killed, no gun involved in that. The worst one was a club up in New York in, I think, 91, where the arsonist burned a building down, killed 83 people. That was the number 3 mass murder in America. Let me ask you this question. We just take these arguments to their logical conclusion. Should everybody be able to carry firearms onto a jet plane?
To a jet plane?
Yeah. Actually, you got people on there who got on it with the idea that they were going to die anyway. So do you think the fact that other people on the plane had a gun would have made the plane safer?
Obviously, we thought somebody on the plane with a gun made it safer because we instituted the air marshal program. Mm-hmm. The problem is matter of fact, Franklin, in the 70s, we had a hijacking problem, and the air marshals actually stopped that, and then we got away from the air marshals. I'm just asking you
a question. All right? I personally don't think that a gun being fired off on an airline whether it's by a good person or a bad person, is generally a good
Franklin,
thing.
that's because that's because if
Them
you
watch
shoot the
those
window
movies.
out, you'll change the pressurization.
My question is very simple, John. You didn't answer it.
I will. Let me.
Do you think everybody ought to be able to take their gun onto a plane?
I had a guy this week that told me what he thought you ought to do is when you walk on the plane, you should reach in a box and you should pick up a plastic gun that shoots a rubber bullet, one rubber bullet, and every passenger should have that rubber bullet gun. And when you get off the plane, you'll drop that rubber bullet gun back in the thing. But the point of it was rubber bullets not going to rupture the windows, not going to change the air pressurization of the cabin. But the minute that guy with the box cutter stands up, there'll be 35 rubber bullets knock the crap out of him, and that'll take care of it.
All right, Lisa, are you still there?
Yes, I think that is a great idea, and I'm wondering if you can also use it on the snotty stewardesses.
Yeah. Hey, I've got to ask you one quick question. I told them that I think that we ought to go up 50 cents a bag on the popcorn in the theater and put gun safety violence into the theater that they can watch instead of some of these ads for other movies coming in with violence. And what's your opinion of that?
I'm still thinking about that, but Jamie Foxx admitted that the movies are too violent, but that was not going to stop him from promoting his movie that was so violent. But like you said, we had the rating system, and younger children were not allowed in these movies for years, and now it's anything goes, and parents think it's fun. And I still believe that the whole problem, we need to focus on fixing families.
If you find a PG movie at a theater and you let your kids go to it, they've got to go up there and watch six or seven advertisements on other movies coming that are totally full of violence.
There's if you really want to read something, it's about 10 or 12 years old, but Michael Medved wrote a book called Hollywood versus America, and it discusses one of the arguments on the R-rated movies, the violent movies, is they're what makes money. And he has 10 myths that he dispels in that. He said actually the highest grossing movies are G-rated movies, and the vast majority of the R-rated movies actually lose money. So a lot of the arguments that Hollywood puts forward for why they make such a heavy density of violent, ultra-violent movies don't even hold up. So it's a good book. It's an older book, but Hollywood versus America.
All right, guys, we've got to go. We're holding up the news. The news is coming. We've got the Queen of Whoop in the studio right now, Miss Lisa Guerin in here, and she's going to give you some of the news after I break this show up here. Guys, as usual, thanks for coming in, and we'll see you next Wednesday, about the same time, same place. Bird Dog, we'll try to talk about a few more local things by next week. I think those jets will be flying by then, and we'll talk about the new jet port out the airport and see how they've affected the cows out that way. Anyway, this is Steve Hickson. I want to tell everybody I appreciate you listening in, and thank you guys again. We're out of here. See you next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at noon today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, back to more music on Whoop FM.
You're listening to 99.9 WOOP